advantage or they oppressed others. Sure. Okay, so you have a better choice. But the other problem is the Prophet ﷺ said that the one who fights just to be called a fighter is thrown into the hellfire. Oh, you were going to say something? Sure. If you're going through that, but if I'm fighting for my own revenge, hmm, or my love of fighting, you, right? That's fine, right? There's nothing wrong with those things in and of themselves. But I believe that one of the reasons the Prophet ﷺ didn't really feed into this narrative of revenge or focus on it is because when we respond, right? So if somebody's attacked and then they respond, and if my motivation is revenge and hurting the other person, when will I stop? Right? And when does that satisfaction ever come? It never does. Right? That satisfaction never comes. And this is why you'll always have disproportionate responses. When people hit, like, if somebody hits me, I have every right to strike them back, yes, to defend myself. Is there a way for me to like actually measure how much he hit me so that I can I can hit him back in the same way? It's not. It's like, okay, well, actually he hit me with like 200 pounds of force. I need to make sure I hit him. It's not how it is, and that's not what's meant, and that's not what's intended. Everybody does have a right to defend themselves. There's no doubt. The what? No, no, for sure. An eye for an eye. There's no doubt about that. So even in Islam, so in Islam you have two categories of things. Like when it comes to qisas, like when it comes to blood money can either be paid. So for example, if you cut off a finger, you would pay. There's a certain value that's attached to that. If you cut off somebody's nose, there's a certain value attached to that. If you cut off someone's hand, then your hand would be cut off too, right? So there are certain things that you have equations of, and there are certain things that you, because you cannot actually fully repay that, like there's no equal, you have to, yeah, you have to give that. You have to like, which is why it's called blood money. Um, like for example, if somebody kills someone accidentally, it's 100 camels. Does that equal the life of that person? No, it doesn't, right? It's and that's not the idea. Like, okay, this person's equal to that. What's interesting though, is a lot of people talk about, oh, like the value of a woman is half of that of a man, but how come it doesn't apply to blood money? How come it's equal? Yeah, of course. Like, so if you want to talk about the value of life, like value, quote unquote, it doesn't matter if a woman is killed accidentally or a man is killed accidentally. The payout for both of them is the same, right? Or what's the policy, right? The insurance policy for both of them would be the same in this situation, right? It's not any different. Yes, it's different when it comes to inheritance because of responsibilities or whatever the case might be, but when it comes to death, then they're equal. Um, Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, he mentioned that when two ranks meet, yani, and he's talking about when the two battalions meet, when the two armies meet, angels descend and record the people according to their ranks, such as so and so fights for fame and so fights for sovereignty and power, because they're able to differentiate between the people's intentions. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh, he said that they say someone is a martyr, but perhaps he only filled his saddlebags with straw, meaning he just filled it with empty air. Like there's no substance behind it. He ﷺ also said, whoever fights seeking only a tie for his camel saddle, and the tie is the thing that holds so you have the saddle, and then you have the thing that, like the bridle that kind of holds it and ties it together. It's like the cheapest part. And he said that if you fight only for that, then that is what you are going to receive. Uh, Imam Ghazali also talks about this idea of instant gratification. So whatever it is that is sought, it can either be beneficial or enjoyable. He said these are usually the two reasons that people seek things. So if I'm seeking something, I'm seeking it because it's beneficial, or I seek it because I enjoy. He said, or it can be both, right? Because it's beneficial and it's enjoyable. He said, but if I understand that if these are the only motivations I have for seeking something, it's actually harmful. That's the only reason. if this is my only reason, then it can be harmful. Yeah, not necessarily, but definitely can be. No, 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 no. Yeah, no, no. It can be. Um, when when can it be harmful? Hmm. So indulgence is one way. Sure. What else? What if I never remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in my actions? Right? What if I fall into a state of ghafla and heedlessness? Right? This is also a place where it can become haram. Even though, like for example, eating. Right? There are certain types of food that are really good, we really enjoy. Does that mean that I can't eat those things? It's both enjoyable. It might not be beneficial depending on what you're eating, right? But and there's some things that are just beneficial, right? Swimming, running, jogging, for example. So I think there are different motivations that we have, but we should try our best to make sure that we always are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in some way, shape, or form. I find it difficult to imagine a Muslim who doesn't like Allah is not some part of his life, right? Like some portion of it. And depending on how practicing a person is, right, and how much taqwa they have, it can either be a majority of their life or like a minority of it. But somebody who's absent of Allah in their life, it's kind of difficult for me personally to imagine or to perceive, even the most irreligious person. Uh, so what Ghazali is building up to now is like this equation. He's saying that okay, just knowing that riya is harmful is not enough. Why? Right, acting on it is something that's really important. And even though knowledge is something that protects us, all of us know that we shouldn't lie. Yes, but we still lie sometimes. All of us know that this is punishable and it's a major sin and that there's accountability. Yes, right? Very few Muslims who don't know that lying is a sin, but we still do it. It's something that we have to wonder about, something we have to think about. So, like I said, he's setting up an equation now to be like, okay, well, what are the things that a person needs to make sure that they don't fall into the app? Knowledge is part of the equation or no? It is. But he's saying that it's not enough in and of itself. Um, because sometimes you can recognize harms. Like, for example, how many of us speed when we're driving? Right, we all do, right? No, mashallah. I'm not, she doesn't speed. She's a law-abiding citizen. But even though we know the more a person speeds, what is the likelihood of being involved in a fatal accident? It increases, right? The faster we drive, the probability of that increases. Does that allow me to slow down? No. It doesn't stop me. I know it, right? Nobody can tell me like, well, if you drive faster, it's actually safer because no. There's no you can't prove that. It's a terrible argument. Where you get away from Are you catching up to traffic, right? Is that what it is? I can convince myself in the moment, right? It's like, no, officer, I had to do 75 in a 25 school zone to get away from the kids. I didn't want to hit any of the kids. And school was about to start. So we know these things, right? There are certain harms that we are completely aware of, but we still voluntarily engage with them. How many of us eat foods with sugar in it? Like we all do. And we understand how dangerous sugar is. And we understand like the diseases that it leads to. So just knowing something is not enough. He says that there we have to do islah nafs, right? There's a lot of inner rectitude that is required. We have to correct ourselves. We have to correct our actions. We have to correct our hearts, right? This is one of those methods, and this is what we need to know. And he mentions, subhanAllah, this is a divine facilitation. If Allah doesn't allow it, guess what? It's not going to happen. If Allah doesn't allow it, meaning this preventing of falling into either sin or showing off. Absolutely. No, it's fine. So if a person realizes they've done something wrong, where did that realization come from? Right? So that's what we're talking about, divine facilitation. And who does that happen for? So what type of person would be blessed. Sure. No, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all Allah's servants, right? The one who's seeking it, right? And the one who doesn't seek it, what happens? He won't get it. And even then, every once in a while, what happens to this person? He'll get it anyway. Sometimes, in different ways, different shape, different forms. Will it be as frequent as this person? No. Because the one who seeks it, what does Allah want for him? Right? He wants him to keep wants to encourage him. And what does that encouragement look like? That encouragement looks like realizations. That encouragement looks like good deeds. That encouragement looks like being surrounded with good company. Right? There's so many things that we can see in our lives that show us that, man, like I'm on the path of good. I had a young woman call one time, and she was like, this waswasa, like these whisperings that I'm receiving, it's paralyzing me. It's stopping me from, being good. I said, okay, well, I said, are you praying on time? She was like, yeah. I was like, are you remembering to do your adhkar in the morning and the evening? She was like, yes, I do. I said, how often do you spend time with the Quran? She's like, I don't spend enough, but alhamdulillah, every once in a while I do still try to engage. I was like, so you're praying on time, you're doing your adhkar, you're engaging with the Quran, you reached out to an Imam. Does that sound like somebody who hasn't been given tawfiq? And she stopped and she was like, no, that doesn't sound like that at all. It sounds like somebody who actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed. And sometimes we don't take, what I mean? Like we don't always take note.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله هيا على الصلاة هيا على الصلاة هيا على الفلاح هيا على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Finish this point, inshallah, and then we'll come back after salah. But here, islah nafs, right? Having this inner rectitude and correcting ourselves, being in a position where we're accepting tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His blessing. And lastly, understanding that if I do show off, I'm exposing myself to multiple things. I'm exposing myself to punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm exposing myself to His disapproval, Azza wa Jal. I'm exposing myself in this world to disgrace. Because if a person is not sincere, guess what happens? It becomes apparent. It becomes very. The most insincere people during the time of the Prophet Muhammad were the munafiqeen. And everybody, like, it became very clear to people who these people did. Even though what? They were praying, they were fasting, they were giving zakat, they were making jihad, they were fighting, they were putting their lives on the line. And even then, with all these superficial actions, the Prophet ﷺ knew specifically who they were. But even the companions, they'd be like, yeah, I'm not messing with that guy. Right? And we can tell in our day-to-day lives. Like, I'm not saying that we can like tell people's intention 100%, no. But we generally have an idea when people are being sincere and when they're not. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all sincere. Ameen.
استقيموا واستووا اعتدلوا تراصوا. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So we had talked about how knowledge is not enough to prevent a person from falling either into sin or into riyā or even into harm. And he's going to talk about what are some additional things that are required and necessary for us to have a successful formula to avoid these things. And he's saying that even with knowledge of these things, people continue to pursue the pleasure of others, and meaning they continue to seek status with others. They continue seeking making other people happy, and this is the thing that will actually cause deeds to be destroyed. And he talks about, okay, someone might be like, okay, well, it's just one deed. And the problem with this mindset that, oh, it's just one, what if that was a single deed that actually tipped the scale in your favor? Right? This is where the danger comes in. We should treat every deed as something that is precious, every deed that is something that is valuable, and how every deed is an opportunity that should not be wasted. Because if we waste that opportunity, it could very well be held against us on the day of judgment. You know, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our deeds. Ameen. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Like our whole life, man, like it's just seeking Allah's mercy, you know, and just hoping that that one deed will be accepted. And many of us are familiar with the different stories. There's a story where the Prophet ﷺ, he said that there was a woman who was taken to paradise because of an animal, and one was thrown into the hellfire because of an animal. And a prostitute, right? This woman was a prostitute. She saw this dog was thirsty. She climbed down into the well. She filled her her shoe up with water, like made out of leather. She gave it to the dog. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted that from her, and he allowed her into paradise. And there was another woman who locked her cat in the house. She just locked the cat. The cat died. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished her because of that, saying that, well, why didn't you just let it go? Like, what, at least the animal had the opportunity to go and hunt and seek for itself. And if it died, it would have died naturally. But Allah understand. Yeah. And we should never overlook the weight of it. Like, we never know what Allah is going to accept, right? It might be that smile that we gave to someone. It might have been that dollar that we gave to someone. It might have been the ride that we gave to someone. It might be that prayer that we made in the middle of the night. We just don't know. Like, we don't know which deeds are going to be accepted, which won't. And we should keep making those efforts for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to accept our deeds. And he's saying, essentially, what's the benefit of that praise, right? So this praise that you're seeking and this happiness that you're seeking in others, what does it benefit? Does it, if somebody praises me, does it give me more money? If somebody praises me, does it make my life longer? Right? There's no practical benefit to any of this praise that we're actually receiving. And if I want what's in other people's hands, I have no control over that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gives and he takes as he pleases. I don't get to decide who gets what and how much they get. Even with our children, like even with our children, sometimes we'll set out and we'll set things apart and this and that. And then they'll walk home like, yeah, uncle gave me $20. Right? There's just no, you have no control over who gets, like you try, right? You try having control over it. But at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gives to whoever he wills. And the more I seek from what other people have, the more humiliating it is to me, because I start willing to do things that are unbecoming of an individual, of a person, right? And it becomes very dangerous. I start submitting myself and putting myself in positions that I normally wouldn't have accepted. So when we talk about, for example, in the music industry, right, or entertainment industry in general, how many people had to humiliate themselves just so they could get places of position, just because they wanted to be like someone else? And sometimes we think, well, how can that happen? That's the extreme showing off, right? Like when you talk about indulging in the riyā, this is what happens, and this is what it can lead to. It can lead to humiliation, not only in this world, but also humiliation in the next. And he says, he ends with condemnation, because he says, like, okay, these are like two opposites. And he said the same thing. Okay, if somebody condemns me, if someone criticizes me, if someone says something bad about me, does it take from my lifespan? Does it give me any more money? Like, no, like these things have no effect on our lives. And condemnation is very different from criticism, right? Criticism, this is something that we should actually seek. It's something that's really important, because that criticism that's coming from the friend or family member or colleague or whoever it might be, it's actually a way and a means for us to improve. But condemnation is something that is criticism that we take in a negative way, right? That's the difference. Criticism is something that we should look at as positive. Condemnation is when we look at that criticism as a way to put us down and trying to keep us back. And a lot of it stems from that inability of our egos to accept it, right? Because we want to always view ourselves as perfect. We always want to view ourselves as like, something that is precious. In the moment somebody says like, hey, I think you did that wrong, what happens to the ego, right? All of a sudden it becomes bruised, and all of a sudden we want to react. And that's something that we should stay away from, something that we should worry of. Ultimately, it's important to understand that regardless of what people say, our pleasure, hatred, all of these things are in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands. And if I want to live a fulfilling life, if I want to live a life that I have contentment, then it has to be for Allah. It has to be. And one of the reasons is that our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually pretty crystal clear. He wants us to pray. He wants us to believe in Him, believe in His Prophet, pray, fast. Give zakat, make hajj, all of these things. It's very clear, this list of requirements that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. There's very clear the things that He wants us to stay away from. He doesn't want us to lie. He doesn't want us to cheat. He doesn't want us to murder, right? He doesn't want us to make zina. These are all the things to stay away from. And if we understand that, then it's very easy to earn His pleasure. The problem with people is that sometimes we'll do things that they say that they like, and what happens? They still won't like us, because we're as human beings, we're not always expressive of what it is that we actually want. Sometimes we just speak because this is the pressure that we feel or that we've created around ourselves to fit a particular mold. He says another important thing is perspective, right? So if we understand that riya is harmful and that it prevents our path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it prevents us from reaching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it does eventually, what happens is, regardless if I'm sincere or insincere, Allah knows. It doesn't matter, right? If I'm sincere or insincere, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that. So how I deal with people is irrelevant. Or I'm sorry, how people view me is irrelevant. It's only how I'm perceived in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's eyes. Like, this is all that matters. Because if Allah is pleased with me, then I'm successful, even if people are not. And if Allah is displeased with me, it doesn't matter how many people are actually happy with me. So he says here, there's no beauty in praise except in His praise. Right, so this is a nice, he mentions that there's no beauty in praise except in His praise, yani in Allah's praise. And no ugliness in condemnation except in His condemnation. That if I want true praise and truly to be loved, that praise needs to be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if there's any type of condemnation I should fear, it should be condemnation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what good is it for you to seek people's praise when you are despised by Allah and among the people of hell? And what harm is there in people's condemnation when you are praised by Allah and among the honored group? And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who are honored. If we prioritize the hereafter, this world becomes very insignificant. And it's very important always to remember that this dunya is a vehicle. That's all it is. It's a vehicle from our birth to the hereafter. And if I remember that it's just a tool, the value gets put in its place. If I understand that this is a tool that I'm supposed to use it, all of a sudden I don't start coveting that tool. I don't start running after it. I don't start trying to praise it. I don't start trying to seek it and make it my goal. Because I know that this is a tool, and once I'm done with the job, I'm actually where I'm supposed to be and where I need to be. Even if it's hard. And living this world is not easy. There are a lot of challenges. There are a lot of difficulties. We all have our own shortcomings. We all face all types of different obstacles. But if we understand that the end goal is Jannah, what happens to those obstacles? They become insignificant, right? They don't become as important. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, I lost my job, or a family member passed away, or I was hurt in some way. While those things are obstacles and they are difficult, they're not paralyzing. And that's what's important. That even the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he dealt with social chastisement. He dealt with financial chastisement. Spiritually, personally, he was attacked, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And all of us have faced our own battles, right? We've all had our own difficulties. We've had all our own different stages of our lives. where we faced different issues and different things. And then when we realize, well, the goal is paradise. It's everlasting. It's forever. And not just that, I'm past whatever difficulty it was, right? It's done now. And sometimes it could be really devastating, right? You're about to purchase a home. You go, you get everything is done. You get a notice that you're fired, right? All of a sudden, like all these dominoes start falling when you had all this plan in place, and it can be very devastating. It can be very difficult. But what happens? You eventually find a new place to live in. You eventually find a new job. You eventually find a new space. You eventually catch your groove again. And everything that happened in the past, it's done. And you survived. So was it really that big a deal? Was it really something to harp over and sit and continue to cry about? And this is what I was talking about when I was talking about guilt, this idea of selfishness. Where it's like, because why am I deserving of more than that? Everything that we have, why do I deserve it? Allah has given me eyesight, He's given me health, the ability to walk, the ability to hear, to speak. Do I deserve any of those things? Forget the wealth. Forget the families. Forget our cars. Forget our homes. Forget the traveling that we've done. Just what we have right here. Do I deserve it? And even what we have here, health. How many of us know people like organ failure, very young? Organs have failed, cancer, some other type of problems, sometimes the issue. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us and our family healthy. I mean, but do we deserve that? Not at all. It's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessing and mercy upon us that we don't have to face any of those things. But because we don't, that should make us even more thankful. Sometimes we forget. It happens, right? It's part of being human. But those hardships and difficulties, we can overcome them and eventually find our way into paradise, inshallah. It is. Like everything. There's nothing here that will be forever. And not just that, even if something has a longer shelf life or can outlive me, I can't out right? I'm not gonna outlive it. So the longest I can enjoy something is my lifetime. That's the longest I can enjoy something. How many buildings are there that are far older than any of us? Does it matter? If I'm only going to live here 60, 70, 80 years, this building can be here for 81 years, right? It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't make a difference. And not just that, if I die tomorrow, how much did I use my life? Right? We just don't know. Like we really don't. You know, may Allah protect us all, but death comes very quickly. It comes very quickly. Sometimes there's people, normal, healthy, like we know them. Next thing you know, some illness, and like they're gone within a matter of days, weeks, months. We really should be thankful. It's been narrated some of the companions of Abu Hafs al-Haddad, he condemned the world and its people. He said, "You have exposed what you should conceal. Do not sit with us after this." Here, he's talking about the importance of sincerity, the importance of hiding our deeds so that there's a greater chance of those deeds to be accepted. And what he did here is that he's giving a lesson to others and saying that you shouldn't be exposing these deeds. You shouldn't be showing your people your deeds. We talked about the importance of hiding one's deeds. Because if we hide them, there's a greater chance that those deeds will be accepted. Because there's no chance at that point for riyah to fall, for us to fall into riyah, because there's nobody to show. And he's also talking about this idea of zuhud, right? So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but zuhud, a lot of times we deal with it and we talk about it as this complete aversion to the dunya. That's not zuhud. I want to be very clear on one thing. Zuhud is not here. It's not here, right? It's not in my dress. It's not in the things I own. It's not there. Zuhud is always going to be here. In how I view the dunya, and how I deal with the dunya. I can have many of the things in the dunya, but if I'm not attached to any of those things, then I'm a zahid. And if I have few things, because a lot of people, what they'll associate zuhud with this idea of like minimalism, right? Like, I need to have a minimalist lifestyle. No, that's not true. I mean, I personally think it's like less cluttered, but you know, that's just more from like a practical perspective. But it's not about being a minimalist. It's about my perception and how I'm dealing with the dunya. And I have to deal with the dunya, like I said, as a tool. That's all it is. It's a tool to get me to my akhirah. And if I use this tool in the right way, right, I can use a knife to cut vegetables, I can use a knife to cut my food, or I can use a knife to hurt someone. These are all tools. And this dunya is that tool. And we have to make sure that we don't use it to cut ourselves. And we use it as a tool to get to our akhirah. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq. Inshallah, we'll continue with the discussion next time, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. But class, same time every week. 6:30 is the Sahih Muslim, and 7:30 is the Tazkiyah class, regardless of Salah. Like, we just take breaks for Salat al-Maghrib. As the time goes, we'll probably end with Salat al-Maghrib, inshallah. So, wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin, nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Jazakumullah khair.